It's the next round in the battle for public space on the Atlanta city grounds. And at this point in the 1950s, Negroes had already conquered the buses and they had conquered the golf courses. But they weren't finished yet. They were back for more, right? Let's continue our studies from the 2005 book White Flight by Dr. Kevin Cruz. Service. After the golf courses had desegregated, little else changed in the distribution of park space for Black Atlanta. The golf courses in Atlanta were desegregated in 1955. To be sure, as the 1950s wore on, there were small improvements, especially when Black homeowners took over white communities and inherited the neighborhood parks. The small improvements refers to the ratio of recreational spaces that were available to Blacks. They made up a third of the population, but they were only allowed to access a very tiny percentage of public spaces. The transfer of Mosley Park, for instance, added 32 acres of land, 2 unlit tennis courts, a swimming pool, and much-needed playground equipment to the park space open to Blacks. When Negroes conquered Mosley Park, that was a come-up for sure. The major municipal parks were still predominantly white spaces, with 42 reserved for whites, but just 3 for Blacks. Accordingly, in 1961, civil rights activists launched a legal campaign to desegregate the city's parks. Negroes were yet again on the offense. This was David trying to take down Goliath. As with the golf courses, the city tried to evade the issue. Its attorneys stalled for time, challenging everything from the class action nature of the lawsuit to the fact that the plaintiffs were representing themselves. Once the case received serious attention from District Court Judge Boyd Sloan, the jurist who had desegregated the city's golf courses in 1955, the city's attorneys suddenly claimed the issue was moot, meaning irrelevant. And here's why. The parks were already desegregated, they said. Park officials and police officers denied enforcing the segregation statutes and insisted that it was merely
by custom and practice
that the races in Atlanta tended to
segregate themselves in the use of the public facilities and otherwise.
They tried to act like they didn't know what was actually taking place. They tried to make it seem like the people were self-segregating based on the way that things had always been. Despite the official claims of innocence, Atlanta's parks and recreational facilities were still very much segregated, if in subtler ways. How? In 1961, there was a group of Blacks who came to the Bitsy Grant tennis court. And when they arrived, the place was cracking. Tennis balls flying everywhere, all the white players laughing and giggling and having a good time. But when the Blacks arrived at the counter to sign up, all of a sudden, the manager cleared the courts and announced they were now
closed for repairs.
That's a subtle way that whites would use to bar Blacks from those facilities. The district court saw through the city's subterfuges, however, and ordered Atlanta's parks, pools, recreation centers, and tennis courts to desegregate fully and officially in 1962 and 1963. We see reality caging off the supremacy once again and removing more and more avenues for it to manifest. Because what happens is that every time whites expose loopholes to get around desegregation, it would get caught and clamped down, right? All of these desegregation orders and racial discrimination laws, these were all meant for whites. They're the guardrails that restrict how the supremacy can legally operate within the society. So after the court discovered that it had still been popping up in the recreational centers, they used the law to lock it down even more. Again, large numbers of working class whites fiercely opposed the desegregation of public parks. More than anything, they were outraged that the city's public pools would be desegregated in June 1963. Oh, that had them hot. And at the point that they were just hoping Negroes wouldn't conquer anything else of theirs.
That summer, people talked about the integration of the swimming pools and little else.
Police Chief Herbert Jenkins remembered.
Frankly, the police hoped for a rainy summer. for there were more eyeballers and agitators driving around, trying to see how many Negroes were using the pools than there were people swimming.
Imagine that. People driving past the pool rubbernecking it. You've never seen a neck stretch so far back to get an accurate head count on every Negro inside the pool. Indeed, on the first desegregated day at Piedmont Park, between 40 and 60 people swam in the pools, while a crowd of 250 whites stood outside the fences and watched. Oh, snaps. In truth, pool desegregation went smoothly, not because whites accepted the decision, but because they had decided once again to flee from these desegregated spaces. Come on with it. For many whites, integrated pools represented a level of interracial intimacy they simply could not stomach. Indeed, the image of black and white children swimming together was so repugnant for them that some segregationist groups sent photographers to Atlanta's pools to get pictures for future propaganda. Such a reaction from hardcore segregationists was to be expected, but even those who embraced integration in other areas refused to support shared use of pools. Something like this seems so petty to us today, but it was as serious as a heart attack to the people back then. Even biracial religious groups, for instance, drew the line at integrated swimming. Negroes were like, wait, hold on, I thought we were all supposed to be cuddled up in the name of Jesus. That's not what the whites thought. A Methodist man said this.
They had quite a few Negroes at Lake Junaluska last year, and they took part in all the activities. However, when 4 or 5 of the Negroes decided to go in the pool one afternoon, they immediately drained the pool.
They took part in all the other activities, praying, singing, reading scriptures, etc., and all of that was no problem. But as soon as Negroes jumped in the water, ooh-wee, the whites had to baptize the pool. Now let's find out why. Many whites, segregationists or not, believe that blacks carry diseases that might be spread in shared waters.
The Negro race is a reservoir of venereal infection. Will you expose yourself and your children to the deadly threat? Keep your children, especially, out of the public pools.
It can get wild at any moment in these commentaries. The rumors of health hazards became so prevalent that the Atlanta Journal had to remind its readers that syphilis and gonorrhea
are not spread by water, food, or air.
Do you see that? The rumor spread, meaning this idea began propagating itself rapidly inside the minds of many people. That's what ideas can do if they are conceived at the right time and place. The human vessel is the host for them, and they stay alive as long as humans keep believing in them. But once you get counterclaims or information that comes along that disproves an idea, then that's when it starts to die. Because everything has an expiration date, including grants, games, groceries, or gods. All of these eventually die out and they make room for the new. The rumor that blacks could spread venereal disease in the water, that eventually died out and it went to the grave because almost nobody really believes that today. But back then, when it was alive, they really did. Not surprisingly, white attendance at the pools plummeted that year. Why? Because that strong belief derived from intense emotions. When an idea emerges from the mind and is also accompanied by emotional fuel, then it highly influences actions. In this case, it influenced whites to not get in the pool, even though that belief was not rooted in reality. But in their mind, it was real. Right? So ideas can have lots of power. That's why we have to frequently check what ideas we have in our mind that may be disrupting the kingdom. Even Chief Jenkins, who had prayed for a rainy summer, was alarmed at the noticeable drop in attendance. On opening day the year before, for instance, the popular pools at South Bend in Oakland City took in 400 visitors each. On the first day of desegregated use, attendance was down to 155 and 259 respectively. And now that whites were leaving public pools, did that mean that they would just stop swimming? Or did they have another plan in mind? Instead of the old system in which large pools served broad sections of the city, Atlanta launched a new neighborhood pool policy, which relied on smaller walk-to pools enclosed in individual neighborhoods. Given the segregated nature of those neighborhoods, such a move could easily be seen as a way around the order to desegregate. For some whites, however, these changes in policy were still not enough. They demanded an end to public pools altogether. In Candler Park, for instance, 850 whites signed a petition calling for the closing of their neighborhood pool, which they claimed had been
a menace to the peace and tranquility of the community
ever since it had been desegregated.
This community is mad as hell,
Noted the head of the local civic club. When pools such as the one at Candler Park were closed, segregationists delighted in it. In 1966, for example, a tour bus driver entertained visitors with a joke about the changes at Grant Park.
There used to be a swimming pool here, but when the integrationists made us let Negroes in, we fixed them by filling it in, and now it's a bear pit.
You see that? They made them integrate, and whites resisted by petitioning for it to be closed. And that's because people don't like to be forced. Unwilling to share public spaces with blacks, white Atlantans once again looked for a private alternative. Here we go. But private pools were a realistic alternative, and many whites rushed to start construction in their own backyards. Anything within their power to keep distance from Negroes, including spending large amounts of money for private pools. Indeed, the demand for private pools was so sudden and severe that a number of fly-by-night construction crews cropped up in the city, fleecing desperate customers. Working-class whites, of course, could not afford their own pools. When other whites were raptured, it was the working-class whites that got left behind. For them, the only alternative to swimming at an integrated pool was not swimming at all, and thus, while almost all whites complained about the self-imposed sacrifices they were making in their flight from desegregated public spaces, once again only the working class had no real alternative. Resources became the limiting factor on how the resistance entity could be expressed. Right? The middle-class whites could resist integrated pools by just purchasing a private one. Then they could do the whites-only thing as much as they wanted. But the working-class whites didn't have that type of money. So their options were more limited. They could resist by not simply swimming in the public pools or by complaining. They angrily attacked the white members of the moderate coalition as hypocrites who pushed a social policy on the poor, but escaped its ramifications themselves. Buckle up.
Don't forget to report on how many of the Atlanta mayor's official family did or did not attend the opening of the city's swimming pools for a nice integrated swim,
Complained one man to the Atlanta Constitution. As he and many others realized, neither the mayor nor his allies in the white business elite would be affected by the desegregation of public parks, pools, or golf courses because they held memberships in exclusive, still segregated private clubs. They were all private and at a safe distance from Negroes. That's one of the reasons they could promote desegregation. It made the city look progressive, which meant more money for their businesses, and they still didn't have to live next to Negroes. Right? They could afford to have a great deal of their mingling done in private because their resources allowed them to resist even more than all the other whites could. Indeed, the most exclusive of these, the Peachtree Golf Club and Piedmont Driving Club, did not accept black members until well into the 1990s. They played the game for a long time. Think about that as we listen to the frustration of another working class white.
Integration for everyone but the rich, high, and fancy. When the black hordes start banging on the doors of your fine homes and segregated districts and segregated clubs and pools, you will sing a different tune. Oh yes, and how you will. Integration is just fine as long as it doesn't touch, in your opinion, God's chosen few and their ivory castles.
This stuff is wild, good people of the planet. Thus, as Atlanta desegregated its parks and pools, working-class whites once again reacted in a now familiar pattern. First and foremost, they believed that these public spaces, which they considered their own, had been stolen from them and given to another race. As before, working-class whites once again understood the process of court-ordered desegregation not as one that brought down barriers to black citizens, but rather as one that erected new barriers for themselves, meaning the supremacy entity was being taken down into the pit. Its time of acting out on the world stage the way it had been doing was coming even closer to an end, and it knew it. Second, in their anger, they blamed not just black Atlantans, but the upper-class whites who had aided and abetted the entire process of desegregation. That anger quickly took the form of a full-fledged tax revolt inside Atlanta, and, in time, greater white flight from it. And good people, we will hear about that in the next commentary. I thank you for your time and attention. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.